I'd like this video to go through the challenges of mental intervention. The reason why I wanted to do this video is because I developed an application in hopes to help people empower themselves to be in control of their mental health. And I feel one of the main drivers to help people to feel empowered of their mental health is to give them an awareness of their desired outcomes. And so let's go through some topics in this video and let's see if we can conclude that, or what conclusions we can come thereof of going through understanding the challenges of mental intervention. So as you can see, there's some topics to my side, and I have the topics listed here too. I'm just going to read through each topic, and then we'll try to understand for each topic how that's a challenge for mental intervention, and then we'll try to wrap it up. Okay, so let's start with profit blazing. So profit blazing, this is just a term I made up. And the reason why I made it up is I feel there really isn't a lot of study to understand the profit motives' influence on human behavior and the profit motives' influence on the psyche. So I call it profit blazing. Another term I like to use to help understand this from an economical perspective is capital stagnation. So we try to understand what's going on in today's world with the whole focus on allocating money for budgeting, and a lot of sales push to get a lot of to raise a lot of funds, and then with those funds to be able to do some really fancy things. And I feel one reason why we might have some economical confusion is because capital becomes stagnated. What that means is capital is allocated, and then the organization or people who actually put together the campaign to raise that capital, instead of them then focusing and doing actual work, they go back to the drawing board to raise more money for other issues. And to be honest, I've dealt with this a lot in my career, where I've worked with organizations and their whole focus was to go out and sell, to raise funds, to make money. And then as soon as they gain a client, they kind of just push that into the back door, and then they get back out there and get more clients, raising more money. Obviously, that's very exciting. But there is some issues there with what's known as customer satisfaction. It becomes problematic, and from that argument, there possibly could be some customer satisfaction issues with our mental health, if you could use that as an allegory. So profit blazing then, to me, is a term I made up to try to understand what's going on with today's society in how we're very focused on the profit motive. Why does this have an issue with intervention of mental health, or how is this a challenge for mental intervention? So the concept here, where it's a challenge, or the argument, is that if we have a profit motive and that's our focus, then we very well might try to harvest profit out of our desired outcomes. So we have desired outcomes. That's why we keep moving forward every day, day to day. We engage with the world and ourselves to achieve an array of desired outcomes. And if the profit motive is top of mind, we very well might be more focused to harvest from our desired outcomes before we even achieve any desired outcomes. So just in the act of realizing a desired outcome, we very well might just move forward, push forward, and then just want to try to harvest that idea, the ideal in our mind of what potentially can be a very profitable desired outcome, that ideal we actually get carried away with. We get intoxicated by that ideal. So that might be an argument to suggest this term profit blazing. Okay, so let's understand the challenges of mental intervention from the perspective of a practitioner. So we have practitioners, professionals who help people with their mental dispositions. And the reason why we need them to be credible and why we need them to be qualified, highly qualified, is because even if you do have the right ailment for a particular mental disposition, to intervene and try to fix that ailment might uncover other ailments or might cause a lot of chaos for a subject. So the practitioner actually has to be highly educated to understand even their own intervention or the act of intervention itself might be a bias on the intervention. So not only do you have to be careful to understand that there's other factors at play that you don't observe that might be a bias, but your intervention itself is a consideration in that it might impact not only your observation, but it might impact the subject's experience of the intervention. So that's another challenge of mental intervention. So I gotta go through some examples it's like a mental exercise to understand where interventions are challenging in other contexts. So let's go through the physical intervention. So if you watch sports, you'll realize that sports includes a lot of dynamic movements, and these dynamic movements incorporate a lot of foundational skills. On top of that, a lot of experience to deal with certain situations on how to engage with those situations. And the challenge of intervention from a micro perspective of how we engage in our dynamic movements, the challenge with intervention is, you'll notice, the more you intervene with your movements, the less the successful outcome. It's true. So if you look at a lot of professional athletes, they're very relaxed. I could give you a lot of examples, and every example I give you, that athlete that might be the subject of an example, that athlete is very successful because of how relaxed they are. So the argument here is the more relaxed you are, the more likely you'll have a successful outcome. Well, why is that? So why is it that the more relaxed you are, the more successful you are? Well, one argument is that when you intervene in your physical movements, in the act thereof of something dynamic, you might be trying to offset some foundational skill that might not be matured enough yet, or you might actually be trying to profit too quickly off the outcome of your physical movement before the outcome is achieved. And that intervention is a challenge. You see how the profit motive does have a challenge from this perspective? You trying to intervene in your own dynamic movement might curtail the outcome because you've invested yourself too much to try to harvest and profit from that movement. So that might be a complicated way to put it. Let's take it from a developmental perspective then. Let's use a different example. So if you remember the movie, or if you've seen the movie, The Karate Kid, it's an older movie, but what's nice about this movie, one of the most successful plots of this movie was that the subject was developing their foundational skill in isolation by doing a bunch of different tasks that weren't related. So focusing on different tasks like painting the fence or brooming, sweeping the floor. This subject was performing different tasks in isolation to develop certain foundational skills separately. Then when the subject was asked to perform a certain movement, they're easily able to put that dynamic movement together, even though those separated tasks weren't related. So isn't that interesting in the development of a dynamic movement, instead of intervening and teaching the dynamic movement to a T, rather you don't intervene with that dynamic movement, just rather focus on the foundational skills. In isolation, it's just a concept. It's a wonderful concept, and I'm using that as an example of, again, a challenge of intervention from a different perspective. So now I'd like to get into meditation. And obviously the art of meditation is to try not to intervene with your thoughts. So this obviously is an easy understanding of the challenge of mental intervention. The more you intervene, the less likely you're going to be able to successfully meditate. So it's a continual practice to continually allow your thoughts to flow through, and to be able to meditate successfully it's a continuous thing. And the experience you gain to be better at meditation is the experience to understand, to let your thoughts pass through. Well, let's try to dissect and understand what it is that's going on in your thoughts that is causing such a stir and such chaos when you're simply trying to do what might be considered the simplest thing in the world, to meditate. So let's break it down. So this is the narrative. So what happens when you think is the thoughts you have are not what you think. You have certain thoughts, and they might not even make sense to you. They might be subconscious, and they might be reflections of the day. They might be certain imagery that you've experienced that still hasn't settled. Might be past experiences that might come out in correlation with other experiences that aren't yet settled. A lot of these factors are at play with a lot of thoughts that you have. What you do from that is you take that and you carry it away to apply your narrative that is most appealing to you, that narrative being associated to desired outcomes that you're striving for. And the more you're trying to harvest a profit from the desired outcome, is more likely that you're going to entangle yourself with your thoughts, which is why it's more challenging. So that's just one way of looking at potentially why it's challenging to deal with your thoughts. So again, going back to the challenges of mental intervention from that perspective to understand it. So let's move on to the intervention from a day-to-day perspective. And this goes back to why a practitioner is needed, a professional practitioner. Even if a practitioner has the best ailment to help a mental disposition, they're most likely not to help a subject right away. You require a lot of care and a lot of attention to understand all of the different variables at play. So you cannot understand not only in isolation what some ailment might be, but also realize maybe it's not a particular ailment that's an issue. What else is a root cause? And if we actually move forward and fix this ailment, would there be other considerations that are of concern? So one of the main topics out of the day-to-day intervention is being separated from the root causes of what might be considered undesirable states. And what I mean by that is when you move forward on a day-to-day and you're moving towards your desired outcomes, if you're trying to profit from those desired outcomes before you reach them too quickly, you might realize there's some obstacles in the way, and that feedback loop tells you that the path you're on is challenging, and you might beat yourself up or berate, or you might blame others or point fingers elsewhere to try to come up with some reasons why you're procrastinating in your progress. So that's the topic of an undesired states. The undesired state is revealed when we try to move too forward too quickly towards a desirable outcome, and we find some roadblocks. So the topic of the path. So the path is what we go on when we move forward towards our desired outcomes. The path is just one way of many to get to our desired outcomes. And what it is dependent on is your perception of what your desired outcome is. So your desired outcome doesn't change with respect to the basic foundational outcome you're looking for. What is different is the perception of it, or the perception of the profit motive, the perception of what value you actually feel you can get out of this desired outcome you're striving for. And then when you pick a particular path to get to that desired outcome, and you find roadblocks along the way that we just discussed with undesirable states, what happens is we become stubborn with that path, and we lose sense of our goals in some aspect, and we intervene with ourselves by either spending a lot of time focusing on what's wrong, pointing blame at others, pointing blame at ourselves, being hard on ourselves with any type of mental ailment or a mental issue or something that we might see as a weakness, and that intervention slows us down, might even stop us in our progress. So the argument here is it really that important to focus on those weaknesses or focus on those ailments? Are they not guardrails to help us move forward? Are they not indicators that help us understand where we are, and that feedback loop helps us understand how we can move forward instead of, giving up and stopping and pointing fingers and blame, etc. So that's where the priority topic comes into play. So how do we prioritize when we focus on our dispositions? When do we focus on our roadblocks in our path? And how do we prioritize? Are we stubborn in our path? Have we lost sight of our goals? How do we reassess our goals, etc.? So this all is concluding to suggest that I have an application that allows us to be aware of our desired outcomes and basically empowers us to keep our eye on those outcomes and to be confident and patient that we're getting there, and not focus so much on trying to profit and harvest what's not there, or harvest our outcomes and not give it a chance to mature and realize the full gain. So with that, I hope this is abstract for a reason. I could get into other videos that might get into more detail. Leave some comments, and that would motivate me to provide some more detail in certain areas. For now, I hope you enjoyed the video and have a nice day. Thank you.